Hey, thanks for joining me today in exploring my pointless thoughts from university. Let me tell you an endearing story of adventure, passion, and tragedy. The year is 3026. Humanity is trying to invent warp drive technology to make interplanet travel faster since the resources on Earth are becoming scarce. Military scientists succeed, but the device is just a prototype. An impoverished Hispanic man signs up to pilot the device. The military trains him in many things, embedding equipment control chips into his body and loads the warp castle with lots of gear to prepare for the teleportation point. A huge media event is called and eyes all around the world are watching. When the test commences, the observing scientists notice something is wrong. They lose the pilot and the test fails. The pilot's family demands they figure out what happened, so the scientists bury themselves in checking their calculations. The pilot lands in a golden field. To him, he's been traveling for about a month. His hair's become unkempt, and he's grown a long beard. The warp drive has stopped functioning. It's nearly the worst emergency code. No contact, no energy, only rations, medicine, and gear. He prays. His faith keeps him sane. Realizing he has no way home, he decides he'll spread the good name of the Creator to the inhabitants of this far-off place. Donning the military gear and carrying the rations and medicine, the pilot steps out into the unknown lands. His first action, following the emergency code, is to destroy the broken warp drive in case there are advanced hostile life forms that can trace the source back to Earth. He then wanders a bit and finds the house of an older human-seeming female. Due to growing up poor, the pilot did not get enough nutrients and was thus not very tall, but this female was short even to him. She is shocked by his sudden appearance and his visual appearance and starts screaming a bunch of things at him. The pilot's gear immediately begins processing the language. Surprisingly quickly, the device offers a translation, a sign of possible bugs. The pilot ignores it and speaks to her through the machine. He explains how he's come in peace and only wishes to teach people about the Lord. He has nowhere to stay and attempts to negotiate using his rations. Luckily, the woman seems to understand the translated speech. She's sympathetic and cries at his story and agrees. A few males native to the foreign planet see the bright lights from the pilot destroying the warp drive. They believe it's a sign from divinity and travel to the source. There they find the woman's house. They give her some goods they were going to trade and use it as an excuse to enter and investigate. The pilot's gear had detected the men approaching a long time before their arrival. Thinking it would be a good chance to start his evangelizing, he and the woman had come up with a story. The woman tells the men she's had a divine baby, which is just a holographic projection the pilot created using his equipment. The men see the glowing baby and fall to their knees. The pilot soon gets accustomed to life on the new planet. He decides to leave the women and take his evangelizing seriously. She gives him a garb to cover up his strange-looking gear. On his travels, he uses his military-grade medicine to help the sick, preaching the word of God along the way. Soon the pilot picks up a group of followers that help him with his evangelizing. They write down every word he says. Not being naive, the pilot knows his evangelizing is potentially dangerous. He does not know the rules of these foreign societies. He discreetly attaches a small microphone to each follower, so if any of them fall into trouble, he'll know immediately and head over. Like this, he travels for many years. He covers huge distances, easily crossing difficult terrains by foot, taking full advantage of his surface tension boots and climate-controlled jacket. He'd sometimes run out of money, but having grown up poor, the pilot was practiced in street hustling. He'd perform magic tricks to entertain people. Sometimes he'd even incorporate his gear into shows, like his biomaterial fermenter and holographic projector. In return, he just asked for a bit of food or short-term shelter for him and his followers. His reputation spreads far and wide. This makes some of the leaders in the foreign world fearful, so they devise a plan to get rid of the pilot and rope one of his followers into helping. The pilot overhears the discussion through the small microphone attached to that follower and has a moment of self-reflection. Having spent over 30 years in this world, the pilot was now getting old. The poor diet and stress from warping was wearing down his health. His medicine wouldn't last forever. The pilot decides he'll go out with a bang and follow the examples set from his faith. The pilot calls all his followers together for one last meeting. They eat and drink and talk the whole night. The pilot has a bit too much to drink and gets a bit depressed. He leaves some ominous words for his followers before the night ends. The following few days, the pilot spends his time programming his gear through his equipment control chips to take a set of actions when detecting certain changes in his vital signs. He then purposely allows himself to fall into the trap involving his follower, getting himself arrested, tried, and sentenced to capital punishment. Before receiving punishment, he asks for a drink and deftly mixes in numbing medication. The punishers nail the pilot to some wooden beams while many people watch. But since he can't feel anything, he simply takes it as an opportunity to speak one last time. They eventually stab the pilot and put an end to his life. Soon after, the pilot is buried. His gear flies into motion, tracking down the pilot's embedded equipment control chips, tunneling unnoticed into his burial spot. The pieces of gear work together to vaporize his body before destroying themselves. The pilot's followers become more zealous than ever and spread his teachings around the world. On a late night, a few months after the failed warp drive test, the scientist is sitting at his desk meticulously reading through the project's calculations while listening to the radio. Still no word from scientists after the tragic passing of 25-year-old pilot Jesus. Click, he does not want to hear it. He scans line after line before suddenly feeling a moment of discomfort. It was an equation that didn't feel right. Cold sweat forms on his forehead as he backtracks. He scrutinizes every symbol of the last few lines carefully. The clink of a pencil falling on the floor echoes throughout the silent office. The spatial and temporal basis variables had accidentally been switched halfway through their calculations. They had accidentally built a time machine.